This is the most complete insider breakdown of how Amazon actually decides who to hire, period. I'm Nick, a former Amazon hiring manager and bar raiser. Since then, I've coached more than 5,000 candidates to ace their interviews and earn over $800 million in total compensation. Amazon doesn't hire based on vibes or confidence, and they definitely don't hire based on how well you tell your stories. Each hiring decision is made against 16 leadership principles, a ruthless internal scorecard most candidates never actually see. In this video, I'll unpack all 16, not the surface level definitions you can look up or prompt for, but what interviewers are actually listening to when they score your answers. This is the masterclass I wish existed when I first applied to Amazon. I've never put all of this in one place before, and let me be clear, Amazon has never published anything remotely this complete, even internally. I've added timestamps below so you can jump around if you already know the basics, but if you're serious about getting hired, I recommend watching this straight through and bookmarking it for later. Let's start with the first leadership principle, customer obsession. What do you see now? Do you see a box? No. Amazon sees a gift inside the box. From one customer to another, Amazon sees love and caring from one customer to another. And what do you see now? Do you see a credit card? No. Amazon sees trust. The customers trust that you will do what's right with their money as a company. And one more question. What do you see here? Do you see chopsticks? Yes, I see chopsticks too. I had to do that. Okay, so let's start with part one, the functional question in our mini mock interview, how Amazon lost tens of millions of dollars because of a mistake. It was Prime Day in 2019. It's ironic that I'm recording this video on Prime Day 2025. Imagine this was 6 years ago and it's publicly available information. You can look it up. It was Prime Day in 2019 and Amazon has mispriced hundreds of items in their photography category. So imagine these are very expensive cameras and accessories, some of them costing tens of thousands of dollars. And Amazon had mispriced those to $94 each. Now, Prime Day every year is Amazon's biggest sales day of all time. They break the records that they've accumulated so far throughout their history on that Prime Day period. And in 2019, it was no different. It was a frenzy out there. People know that Prime Day is here and they're out frenetically looking the site for deals. They found, obviously, about this pricing error, and the whole category was sold out in minutes, literally minutes, everything gone. So imagine you finding out as an Amazon employee that your entire category has been sold out at a discount so deep. And your first instinct would be to sideline all these items to figure out what it is you're going to do. Because unless you sideline the items, the fulfillment centers are going to ship them. But you also realize that if you ship these items, if you sell these items at this discount, you're going to destroy the profitability of that category, not just for this year, but for the next several years combined. So you can imagine as a level 5 or a level 6 Amazonian who discovered this mistake, the pressure starts mounting. The fulfillment centers across the country are calling you now, burning up your phone and asking you what to do. And you don't know what to do. At the same time, you see social media. These customers are ecstatic. They're starting to post images of these items sitting in their shopping carts and their delivery queues and seeing that with Prime Day, they should receive those items very soon, very shortly. And the fulfillment centers are continuing to apply more and more pressure because unless you release those sidelined items for shipment, they're going to violate the terms, the SLA, the service license agreement terms that Amazon has to its customers. So what do? You escalate to your leadership, and there's endless meetings on that day trying to figure out what's the best way. And the pressure keeps mounting. It's like a dam that's about to burst. The next shift in the fulfillment centers is informed about this. The logistics of Amazon are paused. The whole fulfillment center network comes to a grinding halt. You need to decide what to do. At the end of that day, Amazon decided to ship all those units to the customers. I don't know for sure, but I imagine it was the call of the category leader. It must have been a director level leader, L8 somewhere, who made that call. And I can imagine what they must have been thinking. They must have thought, hey, my career may be over when I make that call, but at least we have kept our word to the customer. So what is the takeaway here? Customer obsession isn't just an empty word for Amazon. Customer obsession leads to customer delight, which in the long run leads to customer loyalty. And it's Amazon's firm belief that the best way of getting from here today to that customer loyalty in the future is by practicing that customer obsession. But that wasn't the first and only time when I saw what Amazon is made of. Next, let me take you inside the fulfillment centers, where I'm going to describe the behavioral interview question of how I worked at the Phoenix fulfillment center at Amazon for a week as a level 7 executive. So at Amazon, if you reach a certain level, you are required to go and work at the fulfillment centers. Why? Because the fulfillment centers are the beating heart of Amazon. Despite all this amazing AI progress that we're living through, the fulfillment centers are always going to be Amazon's beating heart, no matter what. And to understand that, every executive at Amazon must do shifts and work at a fulfillment center. And it was my turn, I was no different. And I was looking at gaps in my calendar to do this. And in Seattle, up in the headquarters in Seattle, I found some open time around the Christmas holidays. And I sent in my request. And then the fulfillment center in Phoenix called me and they started laughing at me. And they said, no, Nick, you cannot come here in the holiday period because every single second counts. We cannot afford to have a noob on our fulfillment center floors who's lost and running around like a chicken without a head. We are highly trained professionals. Every second matters. Every single component there is a finely oiled machine matters. And I'm sorry, you cannot come train in the fulfillment centers in the holiday time. So I apologized and postponed my visit there, my work stint there. It was in the summertime. So I fly down to Arizona to service customers from the trenches of the fulfillment center. And some of the work that I did started out as an unloader. The unloaders are people who are in the trucks and they unload the product, usually delivered from suppliers, into the fulfillment centers. And in the summer, it was very hot in Arizona, as you can imagine. And some of these trucks don't have air conditioning inside. So what we did was we turned off the lights inside the truck because for some reason, the human body is fooled that if it's dark, the temperature is not as high. So I worked as an unloader. Then after that, I had to work as a stower. These are the people who take the items from the boxes once they're inside and put them into bins. And those bins are then dispatched into different parts, different places inside the fulfillment center. I was somewhat decent as a stower. I was the least bad as a stower out of all these functions. And every single one of these roles has expectations for the output of how many items you're going to scan and put into that bin in order to be shelved inside the fulfillment center. Then after that, I worked as a picker. And that was my worst performance of them all. The picker is someone who has a mobile scanner of some kind, and they are informed on the scanner where in the fulfillment center the item is. And once you see what it is you're supposed to retrieve, you have to go in that location and get it. So if we imagine that this bookshelf is a part of an Amazon fulfillment center, I would see the instructions on my phone or my mobile device, and I would go there and I would, let's say, take this book, which is expected of me. That's intrinsic. And I would place it inside a bin. And then the bin would keep going down the chain. My experience was that these intake roles were much more challenging than the roles further down the value chain. After that, I worked as a packer as well. And the packers are people who get the individual items that are placed inside each bin, and then they would put them in these Amazon boxes. And they would, in a much better way, obviously, and they would tape the box and they'd put a label on it and dispatch the box out. There was also something called a water spider. Water spiders are people who supply the packing stations, the packers, with the materials they require in order to do their jobs well. So they supply them with tape, with boxes of different sizes and texture. And they're called water spiders because they don't necessarily contribute to the productivity of the line, but they're like these spiders that walk on water, and they have to make sure that everything is humming along nicely. So I could remember in this heat, every day in just a week felt so hard. I was getting up early in the morning and I was groaning in my bed in my hotel room. And I was like thinking to myself, oh, why do I have to do this again? But that's what it takes. You have to show up day in and day out for the customer, and you have to play your part in each of these components of the value chain, because that's what Amazon has committed itself to do, to be obsessed about its customers in the long run. This is not a weekday like it was for me. It's a forever thing for the fulfillment centers, and they can deliver on that because customer obsession is everything that they represent. All right, now let's make everything practical and tie it together in part 3 of how these interview stories, these mock interview stories, should inform the answers in your Amazon interview. Your interview responses shouldn't just sound good, they should display the instincts that Amazon is testing for. When a bar raiser asks you about a tough call, among other things, they're looking for customer obsession. Did you do what was right for the customer? Did you take the pain? Did you suffer a monetary loss if you had to, in order to fulfill your promise to the customer and be customer obsessed? Or did you take the easy way out and cancel those shipments and saved tens of millions of dollars? Customer obsession is truly how Amazon separates missionaries from mercenaries. Missionaries, in Jeff Bezos' words, are people who are on a mission. Those are people who build product and they're obsessed with customers and they are on a mission. That's who Amazon wants to hire. Mercenaries are people who prioritize themselves, who are focused on their careers, who are focused on the path of least resistance. Amazon does not want to hire you if you're one of those folks. And that's what they're going to test in the interview with you. And that's what you're going to need to be prepared to answer and have responses that demonstrate that customer commitment and that customer obsession. Today, I'm going to cover the bias for action leadership principle in 4 parts. 1, I'll walk you through a case study that Amazon gives to its new hires on new hire orientation day. 2, I'm going to describe the 60% rule. 3, I'll talk about the difference between one-way door decisions and two-way door decisions. And 4, I'll show you how all of this ties back to customer obsession in the end. All right, let's start with a real case study that's based on a true story. And when I worked at Amazon, they used to give this case study to all their new hires on their very first day on the job. This true story is from Amazon's early days. Imagine it's 10 days before Christmas, it's December 15th, and customers have gone crazy over this $200 slow cooker, much like this one. And they have purchased 250 units more than what Amazon has in stock. And Amazon has turned off the listing, but too late. 250 units have already been sold to customers. Amazon has then checked with the vendor of the slow cooker, but they obviously cannot make any more. And customers are not wanting their money back. They don't want a refund. I mean, take a look at this guy. It's a crock pot slow cooker with no no mess on the go. If I'm an Amazon customer, if I'm a guy who's finally bought this as a Christmas present for his mother-in-law, and you're asking me to trade it for a gift card, there's no way I'm gonna do that. No way. over my dead body. So Amazon has this big predicament. Now, let me put this down because it's quite heavy. Amazon has this predicament. What are you gonna do? These customers are not gonna take their money back. If you want to give them discounts or a refund, they're gonna be very upset with you. What the Amazonians in Seattle did on that day is they literally got in their cars, drove down to nearby retail stores like Target, Best Buy, Home Depot, what have you, and they purchased these 250 units from these stores and then sold them to the customer. That's bias for action in the real world. There's no meetings, no approval chains. You just go and do what's right. Let me break this down by describing what Amazon calls the 60% rule. Imagine two scenarios. In scenario one, you wait until you have 100% of all relevant information you need in order to make a decision. In scenario two, you make the decision as soon as you get to about the 60th percentile of the information you need to make it. So in these two options, in option one, I'm gonna make these painstaking decisions and they're gonna be perfect every single time. But because of how long I'm gonna need to prepare and collect this information, I'll maybe make 3 correct decisions per day. Mind you, they're all gonna be correct 100% of the time, but there's gonna be only 3 of them. In option 2, if I move at the 60th percent mark, I will make, let's say, 10 decisions. And granted, some of them are going to be wrong because I don't have all the relevant information. So let's say 3 of them are wrong every day, or 4, or heck, even 5. Even if 5 decisions I make every day are wrong, I'm left with 5 correct decisions. And in time, that difference in your decision velocity is going to compound and push you much further ahead. So next, you may ask, okay, Nick, it's fine to have this information, but how do I apply this to my Amazon interview? I'll show you precisely how with an example. Let's imagine you're given a functional system design question that goes something like, please design and launch a competing platform to Airbnb. In option 1, you could painstakingly design all possible solutions and permutations and dependencies and keep collecting information until you eventually launch something. Or in option 2, you could triage the problem and make it very actionable. You could make specific hypotheses and assumptions and produce answers to these hypotheses. So for example, you could say, great, we will launch this in a pilot program to, let's say, 10,000 customers in Seattle. And in order to reduce the feature scope and launch something quick, we will allow customers to book only 1 night at a time in the beginning. And then to reduce infrastructure complexity, we will support only Amazon ID sign-on in the beginning. So with this second option, you're making rapid decisions and you're gonna launch something much more quickly than if you exhausted all possible permutations. That is the 60% rule. That's bias for action and how you should apply bias for action in your Amazon interview answers. Now, let's move to part 3, where I will describe the difference between one-way door decisions and two-way door decisions. When you make any decision, instead of you wasting energy trying to figure out if the decision is going to be correct or incorrect, you should instead focus your energy to determine if this is going to be a one-way door decision or a two-way door decision. What does that mean? One-way door decisions are decisions which you cannot undo. Two-way door decisions are decisions that you can roll back, much like when you walk through a door. If you don't like what you find on the other side of the door, you can return and close the door behind you. I'll give you a different analogy, a zipper decision versus a zip tie decision. If you have a zipper decision, much like the zipper on my backpack, you can either zip or unzip, and you can go into one or the other state quite easily. If you have a zip tie decision, once you make the decision, once you commit, you cannot go back. So you should decide what type of decision you're facing. And once you reach the conclusion that you're facing a two-way door decision, and by the way, 95% or more of all decisions we make daily are likely going to be two-way door decisions. So once you reach that conclusion on any decision. Don't waste the energy to determine if it's the correct one or the incorrect one. Just make it. Move, embrace speed, embrace the 60% rule, and let the high decision velocity work to your advantage. Okay, now let's cover part 4, where I'll describe how bias for action has its limits. So let's go back to the original case study that I gave you. The case study with the 250 slow cookers that were so loved by Amazon's customers. So imagine what would happen if we weren't 250 cookers short. Imagine what things would look like if we were 2,000 cookers short. Maybe you would ask every single Amazonian across the US to get in their car and drive to their nearby Target, and maybe you'll be able to plug the hole. I don't know, maybe. But then what would happen if you are 25 million units short? What would happen if you're 2 billion units short, right? The point here is that there will come a time when bias for action reaches its limits. And I'm going to show you another Amazon true story that illustrates the limitations of bias for action. This story happened more than 10 years ago in 2013 when Amazon and UPS failed to deliver a large number of packages, particularly to customers in New England. Most other companies would have shrugged and they would have blamed the network or the last mile issues which were at play on that day. They would have blamed the system inefficiencies, very similar to how if all of us went to the ATM machines right now and try to withdraw our full balance of our checking accounts, it's impossible to do because there's not enough banknotes in those machines. Amazon and UPS hit the same wall in 2013. The last mile existing network in the United States was not sufficient enough to handle the volume of these packages. So most other companies would have pointed a finger at the system, not Amazon. Bias for action, however, cannot save you on a day like that. You would take the fall, but then you would stand up and you would learn and you would build for the long run with customer obsession in mind. So what did Amazon do since 2013? They have digitized a lot of their offerings via Fire Tablet and Fire TV. They have built micro fulfillment centers to alleviate the pressure on that last mile network. They have launched Prime Air. They have worked on a drone delivery program. They built a third-party supplier network exactly to tackle those last mile inefficiencies. And the result is astounding. In time, Amazon overtook FedEx for the number of packages it delivers. Then Amazon overtook UPS. Today, only the United States Postal Service delivers more packages in the US than Amazon does. As of today, the USPS service delivers roughly 24 million packages per day, and Amazon delivers roughly 16 million packages per day. It is projected that Amazon would overtake the United States Postal Service by 2028 and become the #1 shipper of packages in the United States. That's what Amazon did. But I want to underscore something very important. These competitors falling by the wayside is not why Amazon made these improvements. Amazon focused on the customer. And to show you how, just look at their Prime Shipping program. Prime Shipping used to take 2 days to deliver a package. Now, Prime Shipping takes 1 day. In some cases, it takes same-day delivery, but on average, it's a 1-day delivery. Why do customers even care? For 80% of your packages, you don't even care if your toothbrush is going to arrive on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Why does Amazon do it then? They don't do this to compete with other shippers and outship them for number of packages shipped every day. They do this to delight the customer. They do this because, as Jeff Bezos says, the customer is always divinely dissatisfied, and that's our North Star. Because customer obsession leads to customer delight, which in the long run leads to customer loyalty. Today, we'll cover delivery results, and I'll show you what delivery results really means by sharing with you real stories from my Amazon career so that you could use these learnings in your Amazon interview responses and ace your Amazon interview. In part 1, I'll tell you about my very first day at Amazon and how I terminated a game developer. In part 2, I'll talk about how Amazon doesn't care about input, they only care about output. And in part 3, I'll describe the difference between short-term results and long-term results. All right, let's start with part 1 and my very first day at Amazon. So imagine it's January, miserable weather. I've just walked out of my new hire orientation. I have my new employee orientation backpack. In my backpack, I have email setup instructions, payroll forms. My computer isn't set up yet. I go to my office. My manager tells me, let's go meet a local game developer in Seattle. One of the reasons Amazon hired me was to help them launch a portfolio of games on Amazon's devices. We were building games for Amazon Fire Tablet HD. Amazon released that more than 10 years ago. So we go to meet with this game developer, and it's me, my manager, and my skip level manager in the meeting. This developer has been underperforming for months. They're not delivering the game that Amazon expects them to build. The meeting ends, does not go well at all. We go out in the parking lot. Imagine again this dreary January night in Seattle. It's raining. The three of us huddle around the street lamp in the parking lot. And my manager and my skip level manager, they look at me and they say, Nick, what do you think we should do? I've not been at Amazon for even one full day. I've been at Amazon for a few hours. Yet they asked what I would do in this case. So I said we should terminate this developer immediately. We're wasting time. And that was my welcome to Amazon. You're not hired to observe, you're hired to deliver results. Think of deliver results as one of the most fundamental Amazon leadership principles. I'll tell you a secret. In any documentation published by Amazon, the order of the leadership principles is unchanged, and they're clearly not alphabetized. The order always starts with customer obsession and ends with deliver results. I'll tell you why by using another analogy. If the Amazon leadership principles were a sandwich, imagine this is a ham and cheddar sandwich. And if the Amazon leadership principles were a sandwich, the buns of the sandwich, the pieces of bread, are customer obsession and deliver results. Now, what makes the sandwich good or not is the contents in between, the substance of the sandwich. However, without the two pieces of bread, without the buns, you don't even have a sandwich to begin with. That's how fundamental deliver results is together with customer obsession. So this is a pretty good leadership principle sandwich. So everything starts with customer obsession and ends with deliver results. You don't get credit for trying hard, you get credit for delivering. Okay, now let's talk about how Amazon doesn't care about input, they only care about output. Optics don't matter at Amazon. Input doesn't matter. You could stay late in the office every day. You could leave the office only after your boss has left and stay until 11 p.m. Or you could set your Outlook to automatically send emails at 1 a.m. at night. None of this matters. What matters is your output. There's a saying that goes, the person who sweeps the floor gets to choose what broom to use. So to take this analogy further, if I had to sweep this office, I could either choose this broom or this toothbrush. It doesn't matter. It's my choice. I would be wise to choose a vacuum cleaner, but what Amazon cares for is that this office is clean. And by the deadline, when I need to turn this office over for inspection or deliver a result for inspection, that this result is done and delivered. If you deliver results better than me, you're going to get higher pay, you're going to get more stock, you're going to get better recognition. End of story. It doesn't matter if you worked less hours. All right, let's jump to part 3 and talk about the balance between short-term results and long-term results. Great Amazonians know how to deliver both. To give you a different analogy, sometimes in the Amazon career, you gotta use sprinting shoes. These have super sharp spikes, by the way. Other times, you're gonna have to use hiking boots. And you're gonna have to be good at both sprinting and hiking on long-term hikes. That's what I had to prove at Amazon. In the short term, I terminated this game developer on my very first day on the job. In the long term, I had meetings with Jeff Bezos personally over the course of many months to first plan and then launch Amazon Game Studios. And by the way, you're expected to deliver these short-term and long-term results by being scrappy without having a fancy toolkit. When I pitched Bezos on Amazon Game Studios, I did not have the luxury of using expensive consultants or a Wall Street Journal subscription. GPT and AI wasn't even a thing back then. I had to figure things out on my own by being scrappy, by using Amazon's internal data, by using logic and delivering results. You own your success. You don't wait for someone else to hand you the playbook, which leads me to one final point in this video. You have to commit to your results. Unlike many other companies, at Amazon, you don't offer these options and wait for your leadership to decide. You don't say, "Dear leader, what do you think we should do out of these 3 options?" It's exactly the opposite. Amazon has a famous line that goes, "Unless you can think of better ones." This means that my recommendations and the results that I think will come, I have to stand by those results and by those recommendations. Unless you can think of better ones, this is what I think. These are the 3 or 4 options I've chosen, and I think we should go with option 2. This reminds me of another analogy. You may have heard of it. It's called the McDonald's effect. When you go out with your colleagues and you are not sure what to do for lunch and where to go eat, nobody is willing to come up with a suggestion. Unless someone says, "We should go to McDonald's." And when that happens, good ideas start flying. Someone says, "Oh, no, let's do Thai instead." Another person says, "Oh, no, there's a great Mexican food truck around the corner." A third person says, "Oh, no, we should do Chipotle instead." The point here is that it took a suboptimal decision, frequently made on purpose, to unleash the creativity of the group. And by the way, I love McDonald's. I don't know why McDonald's gets such a bad rap. Their fries are awesome. And by the way, I had to wait until 10:30 today to record this video because they don't serve fries in the morning. So at Amazon, you need to live the McDonald's effect every single minute of every single day. The best recommendation is, "Hey leader, here are the 3 options I've chosen. I think we should go with option 2. Let's go. Unless you can think of a better outcome or poke holes in my logic, I'm going to start with option 2. What do you have to say to that? You own the recommendation and the decision that's going to follow as a result. Today, we'll talk about ownership, and I'll share with you 3 real stories from my Amazon career so that you can understand and get an insider perspective of what ownership truly means. Let's go. Story number 1 is when I started Amazon Game Studios and pitched Jeff Bezos to greenlight the project. And when you work with Jeff Bezos, there's 2 types of meetings. The first type are the real fun meetings where you brainstorm ideas and solutions. Those are the blue sky meetings. Those are inspiring and fun. The second type of meetings are the type when you have to come back and report on what you've delivered. So during the inspiring type of meetings, I pitched a plan to sign 19 new games in just 9 months, 19 new intellectual property games. To set context, over my previous career with Microsoft Games, for more than 13 years, I have not signed 19 new IP projects. I've signed a bunch of sequels, but not original games. This was one of the reasons why Bezos approved the project, because my plan was ambitious and challenging, inspiring even. But once my plan got approved, that inspiration turned into commitment. It turned into ownership. To use a poker analogy, I had taken all my chips and put them all in. There was no going back. I had to deliver on my commitment. The subsequent meetings with Bezos, the accountability type of meetings, were much less fun. There was no we or they or unforeseen circumstances. It was me and my commitment. Did we hit 19 or did we not? And why? That's how Amazon defines ownership. Not did you help, not how hard you worked. Did you deliver your promise and did you own the outcome? That's how Amazon defines ownership, and that's what they're going to be testing you for during the Amazon interview. This takes me to my second story. Let me give you a sense of what life was like in the trenches, of reaching out to these studios and convincing them to work with us. At the time, Amazon was an unknown quantity in the game space. Frequently, when I'd reach out to a studio, they thought I had confused them for a book publishing house. It was that bad. I told them, no, I'm not confused. I want to work with you. I want to build a game together with you. And then they asked why we should work with you. What's in it for us instead of working with one of the established publishers? That's where I had to redefine and own the outcome all over again. I had worked for Microsoft for years, and I knew what worked and what didn't work with a lot of independent game studios. And I defined the playbook myself, and I pitched to them the concept of working together on a dream project. I told them, hey, let's build the game that you've always wanted to build, the game that you get out of bed every morning dreaming to build, but nobody else takes a chance on you because everyone else wants you to work on sequels and something else that you keep regurgitating in order to make more money. So essentially, to use a cooking analogy, I had told them you can choose to be either a microwavable dinner, yuck, or you can choose a chef's knife. Which one do you want? A microwavable dinner or a chef's knife? And I also said, we'll fund the games within reason, and you will own the sequel rights. That was unheard of at the time. Fine, Amazon will own the IP, but you're gonna have exclusive rights on the sequels, meaning that effectively you co-own the IP with Amazon. That was unheard of. Nobody inside Amazon knew how to structure these deals. They didn't know what worked with these developers and what didn't, but I did know, and I used it here. I applied my ownership. Nobody defined that playbook for me. I defined it. I own the outcome. From those meetings with Bezos, where I put everything on the line, I put all the chips in and went all in, to then owning and defining the outcome with each individual studio and earning their trust by showing them ownership. That's what ownership means. And at a lower tactical level, ownership also means doing everything that needs to be done. Nothing is not your job. You almost have to be a Swiss Army knife, if this was a Swiss Army knife, imagine. And you have to be a little saw and a blade and a screwdriver and pliers and what else this thing has. You have to do everything on your own if you have to, or with someone else, in order to drive that outcome. That's what you have to represent in every single minute in your Amazon interview. Not because it was in your job description or because it was approved ahead of time, but because it was the right thing to do. That's what ownership means. Which takes me to my third story of how I clashed with Amazon Legal. After I had made all this progress externally with the game development studios, I had to bring that progress in-house and work with Amazon Legal and draft all these promises and understanding into a set of contracts. And that's where things got really hard. That's where legal made things super hard for me. Not because they were being mean or they didn't want to play fair. They were just doing their jobs. They had to defend Amazon's interests, and they have never dealt with almost all of the terms that I had exchanged and agreed with the studios. And they had to figure out a way how to commit them to paper. And all of this was happening with the clock ticking. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. The 9 months expiring one after the other. So I could not sit and wait for legal to iron out all the wrinkles. I had to act. I had to move in parallel as best as I could. Why? Because again, I was on the hook. It was my word, my promise, my commitment in those Bezos meetings that we would get the 19 games signed and delivered within 9 months. You either do it or you don't. I could not wait for legal to go through all the permutations of what could happen and what wouldn't happen. Legal was focused on a different subset of Amazon's leadership principles. They were focused on insist on high standards and on diving deep. Myself, I was worried about ownership, earning trust, and bias for action. Because if we did not execute with those studios, it was game over. All the high standards and all the diving deep in the world wouldn't save us. It would doom our project. So I had to again, double down, triple down on ownership and keeping my word to these studios. So I just decided to go forward and start exchanging early versions of the paper, of the agreements that we had looked at with legal internally with these studios. That was unheard of. You don't do that at Amazon. But the kicker is you have to prioritize for ownership. As our Amazon VP at the time told me, Nick, you go to legal until you don't have to. You listen to legal until you don't have to. That is what extreme ownership means. And I want you to think about that. Maybe don't share such extreme examples in your interview stories, but know how pivotal and crucial ownership is in the Amazon culture. I'll show you the importance of the dive deep Amazon leadership principle. I will share with you 3 real stories from my Amazon career that will prove how dive deep and data are the playbook that will win in your Amazon interview. Let's start with the first story of a weekly business review meeting with Jeff Bezos. This was before my Amazon time. It was in Amazon's early days. Imagine an intense meeting with Jeff Bezos where he is reviewing a number of customer service stats with that team. One of those stats suggests that on average, customers are waiting for less than 60 seconds before they're connected with a live customer Amazon representative. But on the other hand, some of the feedback, some of the comments on the site from customers says that the wait time is much longer. So instead of bickering about it, Bezos picks up the phone in the middle of the meeting in full view of the team, calls the Amazon 1-800 number at the time, and waits and starts the timer. The time keeps going on and on for 10 long, excruciating minutes until someone finally answers the call. At that time, Bezos just hangs up and looks at the team. That is what diving deep means. It's seeking the truth. You are not looking at some metrics or proxy materials. You go to the source of the truth. Similarly to if I were peeling an onion, it would be not sufficient to just peel the first 1 or 2 layers of the onion. You got to keep going deeper and deeper. At Amazon, I hope I don't start crying here, but in the Amazon interview, if you think you've used enough data, you've got to triple it. You can never use sufficient data in your Amazon interview. Data is the eyes and ears of the interviewer who's evaluating whether you raise the bar compared to the other current Amazon employees. You must use data at any chance you get. Amazon calls this the dentist game. Imagine you're going to the dentist to get your teeth examined, and you sit in the dentist chair, and the dentist puts the Explorer in your mouth to examine your teeth and starts going more and more deeply, asking you, does it hurt now? How about now? How about now? And they go more and more and more deeply until the point where you jump in your chair and you say, ouch, it hurts. Now it hurts. So the dentist game means that in your responses in the Amazon interview and outside, once you get hired at Amazon, but in your responses in the Amazon interview, you always need to go down to that lowest atomic indivisible layer of data where the truth is sitting. You don't provide these obfuscated higher level generalities and proxies. You go all the way down, as the dentist game would show you, to that kernel of truth and give that to your interviewer. That's what Amazon's looking for. That is dive deep in action. When I work with candidates, I hear from them, but Nick, something happened such a long time ago. I have forgotten the details. And that's fine. You can provide a hypothesis if you don't have the specific data point. But what this also shows me is that potentially these candidates have gone with what Amazon calls social cohesion. They did not bother to seek for that truth. And that's why they're not even exposed to what it could be. An example for that would be if I had to measure the height of the ceiling in this office. And I look at it and I eyeball it and I say, well, maybe 8 to 12 feet, somewhere in that range. And with social cohesion, the other person would say, yeah, that kind of looks right. 8 to 12 feet is the right amount, or 8 to 11 feet, whatever I said. That's the wrong attitude. The right approach, the truth-seeking approach, is for you to take a measuring tape and jump on this table in front of me and measure the actual height of the ceiling and find out that the ceiling is actually 9 feet and 10 inches. That is truth seeking. That's what Amazon's looking for in the interview. All right, let's go with my second story, which is how words are right in front of you and how people still miss them because they don't bother to dive deeply enough. At Amazon, in addition to being a bar raiser, I was also a new hire orientation host. What this means is that I was running new hire orientation, and any new Amazonian who joins the company has to spend their very first day on the job with someone like me before they are allowed to join their team. So on that day, one of the items on that NHO presentation was a video with Jeff Bezos welcoming all new Amazonians and sharing with them what Bezos calls the 4 big ideas that define Amazon. Now here's the kicker. The contents of that Bezos presentation are available publicly online. You need to know where to look for them and assemble the message together, but they're completely available. I'll share with you what that looks like briefly in the next few seconds.
We actually do stick to one thing. We only have a few principles at Amazon, kind of core values that we go back to over and over again. And the first one, and by far the most important one, is customer obsession. Another one is eagerness to invent. Another one is long-term thinking. And then the last one, operational excellence.
And there you have it. Now, granted, the quality of the production is much lower. There's no inspirational music going on in the background, so on and so forth. But the essence of the message is the same. And mind you, this information is available everywhere for everyone to consume, yet people dismiss it. And what's more, next I'll show you how not only people don't follow and pay attention to this information, they argue with it, even though it's available to them freely and publicly.
Isn't it, to some extent, a certain amount of corporate arrogance to assume that you can come into these businesses which you have no experience in and virtually overnight enter a huge variety of different businesses and become the best in those businesses?
And so wait.
So Walmart doesn't have low prices, fast and convenient delivery?
I don't want to be overly bold in my claim, but the online model gives us significant cost structure advantages.
Words matter at Amazon. Data matters. You need to dive deep, use that data, and pay attention to the importance of these words. I'll give you another analogy. Imagine if something is hiding in plain sight. Imagine you get this piece of junk mail and you're happy to dismiss it at first sight. But if you dug in a bit more deeply, you would maybe find a $20 bill that was wrapped inside this piece of junk mail. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should unpack your junk mail and look for dollar bills in there. That's far from what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to convey is how something is hiding in plain sight and how the Amazon way of thinking suggests that you should ignore that top veneer and go more deeply and seek that kernel of indivisible truth, following the dentist game and seeking data and seeking the truth over social cohesion. You should display that in your Amazon interview every single chance you get. My final story today will cover the VP obsession at Amazon with small numbers and seemingly insignificant data. When we were launching Fire TV, I firsthand witnessed how VPs making millions of dollars a year obsess over the tiniest numbers in meetings, and they dissect them relentlessly over and over again. I'm talking hundreds of numbers in this case. When we were launching Fire TV and launching brand new games, Fire TV had 0 install base. We were starting from scratch. And I was in meetings where these VPs were tracking hourly sales data by state. They were tracking NPS deviation, score deviations by ID, device ID number. They were looking at UI retention metrics on different buttons, so on and so forth. The point is, the numbers were infinitesimally small, yet the obsession with them and the diving deep was incredibly high. Why was that? Because dive deep matters no matter the scale. And if you exercise this level of data obsession, these small numbers in time are going to transition to be huge. An analogy I'll use for you here is much like you have a pine cone that looks very, very small at first sight, but in time it's going to grow into a huge fir tree, or an acorn here, which is just as small, even smaller than the pine cone, but it's going to become an oak. Very similarly to Amazon's VPs, and that focus, that relentless focus on data, shows you how you start with nothing, yet you focus on it. You drive it from the very first day by using data until it grows into something much more substantive. Amazon Fire TV's installed base today, publicly available information, is more than 250 million TVs worldwide. That's a staggering number. Yet it all started as a pine cone. It all started as an acorn because of the obsession with data and diving deep. And I have to admit that I'm a big Roku fan. I have a bunch of Roku devices in my house. This is my water bottle. Yet I cannot deny that Amazon obsession with data and how important and pervasive that is in anything the company does. Therefore, you should exercise that same obsession and focus on data in your Amazon interview as well. In a lot of other companies, it's sexy to be strategic. It is scoffed at if you're tactical and if you're going deep. Not at Amazon. At Amazon, you have to earn the right to be strategic by understanding the data and understanding the diving deep components of what you do. Don't just know what happened, know why it happened, and exercise that relentlessly. Today, we're talking about earned trust, the antidote, the quiet, unteachable skill that balances everything else. And without it, Amazon is not going to hire you. I'll share 3 real stories from my time at Amazon to show you how earned trust works. And I'll start with the lowest point of my Amazon career. Among other things, Amazon hired me to start Amazon Game Studios. We met with Bezos over many months, convinced him to start the project, and I signed 19 brand new intellectual property games over the course of just 9 months. I describe this in detail in this other video here. So we built the team, we started building the games, we launched 3 of the 19 games, and everything was coming up roses. And then all of a sudden there was a curveball. Amazon bought Twitch. Twitch is a platform, a streaming platform for PC gamers primarily. This means that primarily people who play video games on their personal computer use Twitch to broadcast and stream their games live. And there was a problem. The 19 games that Amazon Game Studios has signed were all mobile games, because at the time, mobile was up and coming. At the time, even a game like Candy Crush had not established itself on mobile. It was still a Facebook game at the time. And the jewel in Amazon's crown, Amazon's own game studios, is not building any PC games. They're building mobile games. We closed the Twitch acquisition of September of that year, and within a month, we made the decision to cancel all of our unpublished mobile games and pivot to PC games. We made the decision to notify each of our studios that we're terminating the project with them without cause. To give you perspective, these game studios we were working with are small independent game shops. Usually they employ anywhere from 20 to 50 people, and they work with large game publishers, 1 or 2 or 3, to pay the bills and build games together. So I had to make calls to each one of these studios and notify them that we're canceling our games with them. I had to make those calls around Christmas time. It was incredibly hard for me because those were my babies. I had signed them with each studio, convinced each studio to work with us from scratch. And it was incredibly harder still for the game developers because that was their livelihood. I would call each studio and the feeling was horrible. We would cancel the game for no cause and we'd move to the next call. By about the halfway point of the cancellations, I could predict exactly how long each call was going to take. Each call was taking 43 seconds on average. 43 seconds. You tell the studio the news about the cancellation, and there's nothing they could do. What can you say? Amazon is terminating you without cause. They would just hang up the phone. And to make things worse, one game studio in Texas, I'm not going to disclose their name for privacy's sake, had not one game with us, but two. And their whole livelihood, the whole studio was working on these two projects with Amazon. We canceled both projects on that same call in that same 43-second period. It was hard, and it was Christmas time. So that weekend, I went to the Symphony in Seattle with my wife and with my mother. Imagine I am dressed to the nines. I have my cufflinks on my tux. I have my fancy white bow tie. I am surrounded by glitter, by festivities. There's chandeliers all around. In the intermission, I walk out in the lobby and it's past 9 p.m. Seattle time and my phone rings and I look at it and it's the CEO of that Texas studio. Let's call him Michael. And Michael's calling me and I'm surrounded by this splendor and this holiday festivity. And he's in Texas, so it's almost midnight his time. And I answer the phone and I hear him yell at me. He was in a bar. He was swearing at me with everything he's got. And I just stood there under the chandeliers, under all the splendor and this symphonic music. And I took it. Why? Because I was the person who sold him the dream. And now I was the one who was taking the dream away. That was a lesson in earned trust. Now let's talk more about what earned trust means. The Amazon description of earned trust focuses on being vocally self-critical more so than anything else. The reason behind it is that in Amazon's early days, earned trust was a separate leadership principle, and there was another principle called vocally self-critical. And then in time, Amazon merged them into one principle called earned trust. Now, it's great to be vocally self-critical as displaying earned trust, but what I think the definition of earned trust lacks in is how you display earned trust to others, being invested in the success of others. It's giving up your own benefit to an extent for the benefit of others. Otherwise, if you exercise the harder leadership principles too much, things like deliver results, high standards, ownership, bias for action, you will turn into a monster. You will leave dead bodies in your wake. Nobody's going to want to work with you. Earned trust is the leadership principle that balances and handicaps these extremes from happening. I'll give you an analogy. If I have my cup of hot water here, and then I get some coffee, ground coffee, and I pour the coffee in my water. There's a lot of coffee. And I stir it with a chopstick. If I pour too much coffee, like I just did, the coffee is no longer tasty and refreshing. It doesn't give me a pick-me-up anymore. It's literally undrinkable. It is bitter and horrible and undrinkable. So the way to make it drinkable again is to add cream, is to add more cream. So I have to put a lot of cream to make this thing drinkable. So I'd put some more cream here. And now the coffee tastes better. This coffee needs way more cream, but you get my point. So earned trust wraps itself around other leadership principles and it augments them. You can display earned trust both in good times and in bad times. I'll give you examples for each. In good times, If you're a manager, you can push your team, you can push your people and give them exposure to other leaders. So you can give them meaty projects to accelerate their careers. You can help them shine in front of others. And eventually, that would help them get promoted. You are putting their benefit in front of your own. You are invested in their success. A quick analogy I have for you, for those of you who are chess players, is that a pawn, when it goes to the other side of the chessboard, turns into a what? A queen. The pawn becomes a queen. And similarly, with earning trust and hire and develop the best, you nurture your people, you protect them, you support them across that chessboard until they reach the other side and transform themselves into something much bigger, into a queen in this case. In bad times, earned trust is just as powerful, and it enhances other leadership principles such as ownership, for example, or backbone. In bad times, when things are hard, you don't point fingers at others. You absorb that blame if you have to. You stand up to them. I'll show you a prop that my boy made for me for this. That's his Captain America shield. And he found out that I'm recording this video and he wanted to build a prop for me. I think it's pretty incredible to me. And you are pretty much like a shield. You shield your people and you demonstrate ownership and backbone when the times get hard. That's how earned trust works. It enhances other leadership principles. And then finally, if you accelerate my example of earning trust in bad times, and if those bad times turn into a failure, like my experience with Michael in that symphony hall under those chandeliers, then earned trust shines even more brightly. Failures demonstrate earned trust better than accomplishments do. That's why it's incredibly important to prepare at least 1 or 2 big failures in your Amazon interview. I'll give you another analogy. These are 2 sheets of paper and they're both clean. But if I crumple one of them, crumple it, and then I unpack it, I can learn much more from this crumpled sheet of paper. Clean, perfect wins don't teach earned trust. Failures do. Failures is where earned trust is forged, and that's why you must prepare failures in your Amazon interview. My final story today is how earned trust is the one leadership principle that has the same bar across all levels. Regular leadership principles, things like ownership, deliver results, high standards, you name it, they have a scaling bar. Earned trust is the one exception to that. Similarly to starting a fire. I'll show you. If, let's say, this little candle was a level 1 at the very lowest level at Amazon, and this big candle was level 12 at Amazon. If I light up these candles, which I'm going to do right now, hopefully I don't start a fire, the small candle has the same flame as the large candle. That is how earned trust works as well. The impact of earned trust shines through, regardless of the level. The flame burns just as bright, regardless if it's a small candle or a large candle. That is why the bar for earned trust is universal across all levels. Earned trust is one of the very few leadership principles which Amazon considers unteachable. If you lower the bar on a bunch of other leadership principles, customer obsession, for example, as many praises as we have sung to customer obsession, if you lower the bar on customer obsession, but you raise the bar on a bunch of other leadership principles, in the debrief after you interview, the most likely consensus would be that the team can teach you customer obsession, because customer obsession, among lots of other leadership principles, is considered to be a highly teachable leadership principle. Earned trust is not. If you lower the bar, if you fail that universal, uniform bar for earned trust of whether you put the benefit of others in front of your benefit at times, of whether you are genuinely invested in their success, of whether you're vocally self-critical, if you lower that bar, that is unsalvageable. Ernst Trust is going to be interwoven through your answers. You either raise the bar or you don't. And I'll show you how to master the leadership principle, insist on the highest standards in your Amazon interview by sharing 3 real stories from my time at Amazon. I'll start with a Valentine's Day failure that Amazon never planned for. In February 2014, Amazon ran an experiment with those employees brave enough to take it on. The experiment was, can you live on Amazon for 1 entire month? I said yes. I raised my hand and I said, I want to be a part of this experiment. The condition was, in any business that Amazon operates in, you're not allowed to use any competing product or service but Amazon's. For example, oil changes of my car are okay, but purchasing something from another vendor is not okay. So I said, yes, I want to be a part of this. I want to improve Amazon's services and products. And I enrolled, and things were going pretty well until Valentine's Day. Amazon delivered flowers to a very limited number of zip codes in Seattle, and my zip code was not covered by that Prime delivery service. So Amazon couldn't deliver flowers to my front door, and therefore my wife got this, an empty vase. You can imagine she was furious. And I delivered that feedback to Amazon Prime, trust me. But here's the key. Amazon didn't run this to brag. They run this experiment to break themselves, to find out what is doable and what's not. That is the definition of high standards. And because of that definition and that way of thinking, today, 10 years later, it's completely normal. If I asked you, hey, could you live on Amazon for a month? Could you live on Amazon for a year? Of course. But without those early day snafus and without those learnings, without those experiments with high standards, Amazon would have never gotten to the position that it's in today. High standards is about pushing yourself until you fail. Amazon expected to get their clocks cleaned back in the day of this Amazon all-month challenge. And they did get their clocks cleaned. And because of that, people can live comfortably on Amazon for a day or a month or a year. Now, should Amazon declare a victory because of that? No. Customers are always divinely dissatisfied, as Bezos says. And that dissatisfaction makes high standards the true North Star of Amazon. Look at Prime shipping today and how far it has evolved. Amazon launched Prime as a 2-day shipping promise for which you paid a subscription. But then they changed Prime in time to a 1-day shipping promise. Now, frequently, Amazon delivers items same day to customers. Why? Why do you care to get the majority of your items on Wednesday or Thursday? You don't. I'll give you an example. Do you care to get a toothbrush a day earlier or not? Or do you care to get this 3D dinosaur wooden puzzle a day earlier or a day later? No, you don't. You don't. Yet Amazon gives you that promise and keeps pushing that high standards of Prime is going to deliver in 2 days, then they're going to deliver in 1 day, then they're going to deliver same day, then they're going to deliver, I'm sure, within a few hours. That dissatisfaction and that high standards never rests. Therefore, you should look at high standards as a means to an end. And that end almost always is customer obsession. High standards is not an island. It's the thing behind the curtain that pushes Amazon forward. Now, high standards by default and by design disagrees with some of the other sexier leadership principles, such as deliver results and bias for action. But in those disagreements and in those clashes, high standards is like the glue that keeps Amazon's culture together and pushes the company forward. Think about it from another point of view. Even when Amazon announced the 1-month Amazon challenge in 2014, they were looking for people, for employees willing to take that leap. They were looking for missionaries, not mercenaries. They were looking for fools like me who are willing to enrage, to incur the wrath of their spouses to help push the high standards leadership principle in Amazon further. That's the importance of high standards. What happens behind the curtain while no one's looking? Now let's talk about OP1, Operating Plan 1, which is my second story today. OP1 happens once a year at Amazon, and it's the budgeting and planning exercise that keeps the company operating year in and year out on a 12-month going basis. The way this exercise works is that it's a bottoms-up exercise where every team gets together once a year for a number of months and thinks about their goals that they're willing to commit to for the next 12 months, and also what new products and services they're going to build. What established products they're going to keep marching forward with and keep shipping and so on and so forth, and what the goals are for these products, and also what new crazy unproven ideas they're going to take on and try to incubate from zero. So every team does this exercise and then gets together and reports that exercise to their manager. And then once the exercise completes for that team, then the next higher level team, the team of all the managers who've just had their OP1 plans done, they get together and they form their own OP1 plan. And then all the directors do the same thing. They report to the VP, and then the VPs report to the senior VPs, and the senior VPs report to the CEO. That's how the OP1 process works at Amazon. When I worked at Amazon, in Amazon Game Studios, our OP1 plan usually peaked at the CEO level of AWS. At the time, the AWS CEO was Andy Jassy. That was fine and dandy until one year we had made a number of significant acquisitions in Amazon Game Studios so that our OP1 was selected to go all the way up, not just to Jeff Bezos, but to the Amazon board of directors. It was an immense amount of pressure. And I was the lucky soul who was selected to be the person who would write the OP1 plan. I was effectively the program manager who would work with all the individual teams, all the leaders of those teams, so on and so forth, get together their products, their goals, their crazy ideas, and have that document be delivered to the Amazon board of directors. One clarification here, one final clarification, is that these OP1 plans, they're not presentations. They're not these pitches that you show up live and present on a board behind you. No, these are documents. These are narrative documents that are 6 pages in length and have an unlimited number of pages in the appendix. So I was the person in charge of writing the OP1 document, and I revised that document 72 times. I'll repeat it again. I revised the document 72 times, like this little stubby pencil. I kept doing it over and over and over again. I kept pushing myself. That is high standards. Endless scrutiny, revision after revision after revision. The goal isn't to get it right once. The goal is to pressure test it until it cannot be wrong. I scrubbed every single idea, every single statement, every single thought, every punctuation, countless times over and over until it was just right. I'll use another analogy to give you a sense of what this is like. In law exams, professors would italicize the semicolon mark because whether it's italicized or not changes the legal meaning of the entire paragraph. It's practically imperceptible to the eye, but it matters a ton. That was the high level of high standards that I committed to, and that we all as a team committed to, revising this document 72 times. That's what OP1 is like. Details that are imperceptibly small matter and drive businesses that deliver billions of dollars worth of revenue. All right, let's move to my third and final story about the goals process at Amazon. I mentioned that goals are a part of the OP1 process, and goals are brutal. Goals are the things that you commit to as an Amazonian to deliver over the next 12 months. And each goal must have what's called a single-threaded owner. Each goal is non-composite, meaning it cannot be broken into any amount of smaller goals. It's at the lowest indivisibly atomic level of specificity. But because of high standards, at Amazon, you are expected to fail on at least 30% of your goals. High standards commands that you are ambitious with those goals. Much like a balloon, I'll show you. Here's a balloon. And high standards expects you to push that balloon high and inflate it and be ambitious with it until you pop it, until 30% of those goals are expected to fail. That's what high standards means. Once a goal is set in the Amazon OP1 process, it cannot be changed. The output, the outcome for that goal could either be you met the goal or DNM, you did not meet the goal. That's how unrelenting and exact high standards is. You could come up with a number of new goals as you go through the year and you learn more about your business and you hear from customers and you observe their behaviors. You add goals to that original OP1 list of goals. But those goals, the existing ones and the new ones, they could not be changed. They're non-compound goals, atomically indivisible goals with only two outcomes, met or did not meet. In the system of the Amazon goal setting process, you can again see how high standards does not live alone. It combines well with other leadership principles such as invent and simplify, learn and be curious, and think big. And in that environment, high standards and pushing you to fail leads to a better byproduct and a better end result, like that empty vase 10 plus years ago on Valentine's Day led to indirectly Amazon becoming the de facto standard for millions of people around the world to rely on their services and products day in and day out, hour in and hour out. And I'll share 4 stories from my time at Amazon to show you how to master the invent and simplify leadership principle in your Amazon interview. I'll start with how Amazon almost canceled its Fire TV launch because 6 hero games weren't ready. Fire TV is Amazon's streaming TV product, and it currently has an install base of more than 200 million units worldwide. When we launched it, however, success was far from certain. Launch was scheduled for April 2014, and one of the must-have requirements was having 6 hero games on the device. I was the person in charge of shipping these 6 hero games. I was told as an internal Amazon employee about the launch of Fire TV 9 months before launch happened. My first reaction was, wow, 9 months is tight, but still doable. If we overnight development kits to about 20 or 30 developers tomorrow, that would give us big enough funnel so that we will have 6 hero games to choose from. Amazon then laughed at me and said, no, you don't get this. We keep things confidential here. Every external non-Amazon person who sees and touches the device must get the approval to do so by the Amazon VP of devices and must sign an individual NDA. That made my job practically impossible. The way you build games is you have to disclose the whole studio of 20 to 30 people, and then you start with a funnel of 20 to 30 games in order to ship a portfolio of 6. So if I were to go down the path of getting individual approvals by the Amazon VP for this funnel of game developers, I would need to collect about 1,000 different NDA approvals. And that would be impossible with 9 months to go. It would take 9 months just to collect the approvals, let alone to build the games. So I looked at my management and I said, no, that's impossible. And then they looked back at me and said, no, what you're asking for is impossible, to send all these kits out there without the proper disclosure agreements. So we kept telling each other that this was impossible until my management finally said, look, this is non-negotiable. You figure out how to do it, and just know that if we have to delay launch because we don't have the 6 hero games, it's going to be on you and there'll be hell to pay. So I had to resolve this impossible challenge, and I didn't know for days on end what to do until one day I got a phone call. And it wasn't a phone call from someone important. It was a phone call on my old trusted Android phone. And when I got the phone call, it dawned on me, wait a minute. The architecture of the phone, the processor, the memory, the motherboard is virtually identical to the architecture of the Fire TV. Believe it or not, the processing chip inside a telephone, inside an Android phone, is similar to the processing chips inside these big screen TVs that you have at home and these TV pucks that you connect to your TVs. So that was my epiphany. At the time, Qualcomm was building the hardware for Fire TV, and Qualcomm was obviously disclosed on Fire TV from A to Z. And I went to the Qualcomm team and said, look guys, I need you to put together a representative architecture of the guts of the Fire TV. And I need you to go to these 30 or so developers that I tell you about and ask them to build games or port their existing games for that architecture. And that unlocked everything. Qualcomm started working with these developers right away, and there was no disclosure necessary. It was a bunch of silicone. And they started building and optimizing the games for the Fire TV without knowing this was a Fire TV future super secretive launch. And with about a month to go before April 2014, there was this big game developer conference. And I made sure that Qualcomm would have a secret conference room there and invite all game developers that were developing these games for Fire TV and tell them, look, there'll be just one of you in that secret room. They will sign an NDA disclosure agreement. The games are already built, and that solved the problem. This is similar to a bunch of glow sticks. You need to break them first. You need to break the process, and then the shine comes through. You need to invent and simplify. That is the very definition of this leadership principle. Okay, moving on to my second story, Fire Phone, the gift inside the failure. In 2014, in addition to Fire TV, Amazon launched Fire Phone. Unlike Fire TV, which was a spectacular success, Fire Phone was an even bigger failure. Fire Phone featured 4 3D corner cameras. Think of Fire Phone as one of the very early precursors to augmented reality and virtual reality devices today, like MetaQuest. At the time, Fire Phone was a spectacular failure. Customers didn't care for that features, but they cared for being able to control the device with their voice. And that voice controlling feature gave rise to what presently is Amazon Alexa and the Amazon Echo line of devices. So you can see, very similar to nested dolls, Fire Phone, that's what this silly label says. Much like nested dolls, the Fire Phone was the outer shell, the spectacular failure. But if you opened it, if you looked deeper inside, you would see another nested doll, which is Alexa. That is another example of invent and simplify. All right, let's move to story number 3. The 2 types of Jeff Bezos meeting you never forget. Meeting type number 1 is the blue sky, blue ocean type invention meeting, where mistakes are welcomed, where we're brainstorming. Amazon has this saying how 2 is better than 0, and in time that leads to 1, meaning how you ask multiple different teams to work on similar projects because they're new, they're inventive, and you don't know which idea and which project from which team is going to succeed. And via A/B testing and building along, you get those concepts down to 1. There's another type of meeting, however. That is the tactical meeting. And the tactical meeting usually comes after the brainstorm, blue sky, love and rainbows type of meeting. And let me tell you, those tactical meetings are horrendous because there's 0 tolerance for failure. You have to execute. You have to scale something. You have to simplify it in order to scale it. We've done this before. What's wrong with you? Just build it. An example of this from Amazon's many businesses would be shipping packages to customers. Amazon has been shipping stuff to people's front doors forever. So why are we still making mistakes there? I'll use another analogy to demonstrate this. Imagine if you don't know that eggs are fragile, and this is an egg, and you come from outer space and you don't know that eggs on Earth are fragile, and you smash the egg and you find out that eggs are fragile, and it's a great discovery for you, and that's okay. However, now imagine that once you know that eggs are fragile, you come up with a bunch of more eggs, and despite your knowledge, you smash them again, you crash them again, and you make a mess. That mess inside this bowl is no longer an invention. It is failure, and it no longer is subject to the benevolence of the invent and simplify principle. It is subject to the accountability of delivery results and ownership and bias fraction and a bunch of other more executional, more tactical leadership principles that you must adhere to in your Amazon career as well. I need to wash my hands before I continue this video. Give me 1 second. My fourth and final story today is how to tell Invent and Simplify apart from two other leadership principles like Think Big and Learn, Be Curious. These are similar, but they're very different as well. And I'll give you the code on how to decipher which is which. Invent and Simplify is when you're an expert in a field and you apply that knowledge in another team or company or industry, and the knowledge that you've applied already exists and works fine somewhere else. You've just spotted the inconsistency, the ability to improve, and you've applied that knowledge and you've improved things. That is textbook Invent and Simplify. Think Big is when you are an expert in a subject matter field, but what you invent and what you apply has not been done anywhere else. You are building this from scratch as a precedent that does not exist in any other field. That's the difference between thinking big and inventing and simplifying. And I would venture to say that Think Big is the toughest Amazon leadership principle to demonstrate. We'll talk about Think Big in a separate video. And the third leadership principle, which looks similar to these two, but it's completely different, is learning and being curious. Learn and be curious happens when you're not an expert in a topic, or you're brand new and you teach yourself something from scratch in order to unblock yourself or in order to solve a problem. So you see the difference between the three, and I hope this helps you in coming up with stories for your Amazon interview. My first story of the 5 is how I turned a Starbucks coffee shop into a training ground for one of my future Amazon hires. While at Amazon Games, I hired this person. Let's call him Tony. Tony was in Seattle. He went through his Amazon interview loop. We decided to hire him, but he needed a working visa in order to start his Amazon employment. The working visa would take 3 months to complete. So we could either sit on our hands and wait for the 3 months, or we could start working together. And that's what we decided to do. He and I started meeting every week at a local Starbucks here, local Starbucks next to the Amazon spheres. And we started having a set of unofficial one-on-ones. I obviously could not disclose anything confidential to Tony because he had not signed his employment paperwork, but we started meeting to get him going. We talked about the industry, the type of advertising knowledge he needed to have, and in a way that served as Tony's training wheels. He was meeting with me unofficially for 3 months, once a week, and got going in his new job. I also asked him to write an Amazon document for me, a narrative, so that he could learn about Amazon exacting writing culture. And we started building this knowledge set in him before we were even supposed to. So that when his visa came 3 months later on the dot, he was ready to hit the ground running. What we did, Tony and I, was an illustration of the Amazon leadership principle, learn and be curious. Amazon is not looking for know-it-alls. They're looking to hire people who can learn, who can unlearn, and who can stay curious. That's the essence of this leadership principle. In your Amazon interview, look for questions where you can describe your ability to learn new concepts, to remain curious. As you exchange information with each interviewer, apply that information in how you communicate with them, in the questions that you ask them at the end of the interview. It's incredibly important to display learning and being curious in your Amazon interview. My second story today that displays the importance of the learn and be curious leadership principle is how we snuck Amazon games in the Apple App Store walled garden. When we started Amazon Games, Amazon was a first-party publisher, meaning we were building games to publish only on our platforms and our devices. In time, it became obvious that our gamers were not just on our devices, and that in order to reach them, we had to publish those games on other companies' platforms. Apple App Store is the leading platform for mobile games, and we had to figure out a way how to do so, how to publish our games on that App Store. The tricky piece is that each of these App Store owners charges a 30% platform fee, so we needed to find a way to publish our games on the Apple App Store and circumvent the 30% platform fee as best as possible. I'm not going to bore you with the details of how I did this, but it's safe to say that it required a ton of learning. Nobody at Amazon had done anything like this before. Therefore, my team and I had to figure out from scratch a process of publishing our games onto the Apple App Store. And we did it. We ended up establishing a separate company. Again, as I said, I'm not going to bore you with the details. You fast forward to today, Amazon is publishing games not just on the Amazon App Store, but on a lot of other app stores as well. For example, Amazon is publishing games on the PlayStation, which is possible today, many years later, because of the work that I did and my team did back in the day. You're not an expert in a field, you're a complete novice, yet you go deeply, you learn the topic, and you deliver an output. Does learn and be curious require you to become an expert in the topic? No, it doesn't. It requires you to come up with a working, elegant, and feasible solution. The expertise is going to come later. That's going to follow. Learning and being curious is about finding the initial nugget of knowledge and wherewithal to do something. Story 3 is why Amazon wants you to leave with a smile on your face even after a no hire decision. When Amazon interviews candidates, they care for 2 big tenets. 1, does this candidate raise the Amazon hiring bar? We've talked enough about this in other videos. 2, does this candidate walk away from the interview loop thinking more positively about Amazon than before the loop? Amazon views each interview experience as the ability for interviewees to learn about the company. Every single one of us is an Amazon customer or a potential Amazon customer. It's fantastic when Amazon makes a hiring decision, but they hire less than 10% of the people who apply there. Therefore, it's important for the ones who are not hired to walk away with this positive mindset about the company. That is another manifestation of learn and be curious. These individuals go in the interview not knowing about Amazon's culture or Amazon's people, and they walk out with a positive disposition to Amazon, even though they were not hired. That's a very tall order, but Amazon aspires to it no matter what. My 4th story is why curiosity feels like play and also helps to get you hired. When Amazon reviews its businesses in the OP1 rigorous review process, we've talked about this elsewhere as well, these processes are focused on efficiency and data and so on and so forth, but they also have an element of playfulness and curiosity. Jeff Bezos is known for asking each team, how are you encouraging customers to be more playful with your products? Similarly to a fidget, where you are enjoying yourself in the process by playing with your product, by being involved in it. How are you both as a builder enjoying that playful experience, and how you are encouraging your customers to be playful as they are consuming a product, because that's part of our nature as humans. Practicing this learning muscle would cause that openness to new ideas, which will result in better business outcomes as well. So how can you apply that mindset in the interview? Today is the best time of any to learn and to keep an open mind, especially in this age of AI and ubiquity of information anywhere. I strongly encourage you to just learn, constantly learn. Use the Amazon interview or any other interview you're going for as a pretext, as a reason to learn more about the company you're interviewing with. In a way, as the saying goes, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Effectively, you should try to be like a pawn on the chessboard. Don't be the smartest person in the environment where you're in. Try to surround yourself with people who are better than you, who know more, and learn from them. Always learn and apply that curiosity in order to further your own knowledge. In this video, I'll reveal the secret that turns Amazon's toughest questions into the answers that win your interview. And I'll do this by sharing 5 real stories from my time inside the company. I'll start with how Amazon accidentally invented its own Christmas. Amazon started Prime Day in 2015. Prime Day seems like a random day in the middle of July when Amazon discounts the majority of the products on their site. Why did they decide to do that? Was it because they wanted to spruce up one of the historically slow quarters for them with extra discounts and sales? No. Amazon started Prime Day because it had the wherewithal to try to prepare for the upcoming Christmas holiday and simulate that environment as best as they could. They tried exercising thinking big. Think big is one of Amazon's 16 leadership principles and is by far the toughest leadership principle with the toughest interview questions during the Amazon interview. Prime Day turned over the years from a free hit day that gets you ready for Christmas into the most important sales day in the history of Amazon. Every year, Amazon exceeds its sales records of all time at Prime Day, and then that gets beaten by Christmas Day in the same year. That's how significant Prime Day has become. Prime Day has essentially turned into an Amazon Christmas of its own making, a synthetic Amazon holiday that they produced in the middle of the summer. And that illustrates the importance of thinking big, where Amazon took a chance on a bold hypothesis with absolutely zero precedent to lean on in making that decision. And that hypothesis turned into something huge for them. That's the essence of thinking big. Thinking big means, can you produce decisions that lack prior precedent? In time, Prime Day turned into the tuning fork that sets the tone for the entire year of the company. And that demonstrates the significance of thinking big in the Amazon culture. They're going to expect you to demonstrate think big in your Amazon interview as well. My second story that explains think big is how Amazon replaced meetings with code. Jeff Bezos, when he started the company and throughout its evolution from a startup to an incumbent, has made it a point to minimize the friction in decision making. Normally, people make decisions by getting together and talking it out, and that's usually done in meetings. However, in time, Bezos saw the inefficiency of this approach and decided to change that pattern. Let's make decisions via code. Let's make decisions via API compatibility, not with people sitting in meetings. The way Bezos implemented this is he mandated that any product that Amazon builds needs to have a set of mandatory open API that any other internal team can call and address if they had the need to interact, so that if you follow this open-ended infrastructure in building products, if you want to add something else to an existing product, or if you want to use something that's already done by a different team, you're not going to meet with that team and say, hey, could I please use your child into the thing that I'm going to build next? You're going to just call their APIs and instantly connect to what they have. You can only achieve this if you deliberately force every product, every service to have a set of addressable APIs that other API based services can call. And that's what in time incredibly facilitated and smoothened the decision-making process at Amazon. And in the short term, this requires more heavy lifting. This requires less spaghetti code, and you need to document your APIs, and you need to make sure that they work, and so on and so forth. But in the long term, this helps you tremendously. So effectively, the API structure at Amazon is like a metronome. This is not a metronome. These are 5 balls that smack into each other. But that's how seamless product development is at Amazon. And that's how Think Big generates and facilitates that. And furthermore, this open API standard enabled Amazon to turn these products in time from internal services into monetizable external products. My third story to explain Think Big is how Amazon had to take on Walmart or lose the game entirely. What do I mean by that? Amazon is an e-commerce company that goes after the offline commerce sales in the US and worldwide. However, you need to know structurally how much of those offline sales you could cannibalize, you could take over. If Amazon sells only non-perishable products, they could only cannibalize, they could only eclipse their non-perishable product competitors. And Amazon did that for a while in its early days, until you run out of room to grow. And when you look at behemoths like Walmart, you realize that 60% of Walmart's sales, as recently as 2025, 60% of their global revenue comes from perishable and grocery-like products. So Amazon decided to jump with a parachute that wasn't really clear if it was going to open or not. They had to jump off that cliff in order to stay relevant in the e-commerce space. And over the years, they've taken a lot of steps to that effect. Initially, they purchased Whole Foods. Then they started the Amazon Fresh stores and the Just Walk Out technology. And in time, they're continually investing in the perishable product space. Why? Because you have to think big. It is lunacy. That's why I showed you this toy parachute. It is lunacy to think that you could go after Walmart. It's impossible. You can come up with all kinds of excuses, and these are really great excuses, how products need to be fresh. They need to be purchased daily by customers. It's impossible for those products to be fulfilled. The history of e-commerce is littered by the corpses of grocery delivery companies that have failed and have gone nowhere. That matters little. Those are just excuses. If you describe in your interview answers a case when you applied a previous learning from a previous job into your current job or your current team, that's not thinking big. That's invent and simplify. Thinking big means you've invented something without a precedent. It is incredibly hard to come up with examples like that. And when you think of such examples for your Amazon interview, think of times when you were contemplating answers that were ludicrous, where you were contemplating ideas that others would laugh at you for. Effectively, the output of your accomplishment, the output of your star story becomes less important than how outlandish and how unproven your idea was. The majority of other leadership principles are straightforward: deliver results, bias for action, customer obsession. You could easily come up with 3 or 4 answers per each of these leadership principles. The next story in the queue is story number 4, which is how Amazon invented prompt engineering before AI was even a thing. From the very creation of Amazon, Bezos established the PRFAQ document. PRFAQ stands for Press Release Frequently Asked Questions document. Every team which was asking for significant investment to build a new product or a new service had to present to Bezos and his senior leadership team a press release where Amazon would imagine what this product would be like when it's announced in its entirety and in its complete state to the public. So that PRFAQ doc effectively is a very early precursor, a very early version of today's AI prompt engineering. So to explain the PRFAQ concept, I've chosen this time capsule as another prop where I would put a document, a printed page inside this time capsule, and then I'll close it and I'll put the screws here and put it away. That's effectively what the PRFAQ process is to the current methods of modern prompt engineering. So you can see how Bezos and Amazon, in their own peculiar way, anticipated needing to work backwards and needing to be very clear about the final outcome and output that they're shooting for in order to understand how the process prior to that output needs to look like. And my 5th and final story today is how to know which Amazon leadership principle, which Amazon skill you're showing with your answers. Think big is a challenging LP to demonstrate, and you need to know how that LP leadership principle compares to other Amazon leadership principles, in particular to invent and simplify and learn and be curious, because they seem quite similar to it. To use another analogy, if I had these 3 identical at first sight keys, and each of these 3 keys opened a different door, I need to know which key opens which door in order to use it correctly. So I'm going to give you the key on think big versus learn and be curious versus invent and simplify. But before that, I want to close with one final remark on how to use think big in your Amazon interview. This skill is expected of more senior Amazon employees, senior level Amazon employees. You can absolutely expect to get this type of skill evaluated if you're interviewing for level 6, level 7, level 8, or a higher position. If you're interviewing for level 4, 5, or lower than 4 and 5, it's likely that you're not going to be asked a think big question. So the good news for you, if you're in that category, is that you don't need to worry about this. The reason behind this is that more junior level Amazonians are not necessarily expected to think out of the box so much. They're expected to deliver on what their leadership is expecting them, is mandating them to do. They're going to need to be strong and invent and simplify and learn and be curious, not so much in think big. In this video, I'll share 4 real Amazon stories that reveal how Amazon interviews you for what can't be measured. And I'll start with the impossible decision that changed everything: the launch of Amazon Prime. This happened in the early 2000s when Prime shipping didn't exist. Back then, Amazon's retail revenue growth was slowing down. In 2004, Their growth slowed from 15% the previous year to 12% year over year growth. And Bezos saw a house on fire issue. So imagine I'm waiting for my Amazon box to arrive with something I care for. And then the clock starts ticking and it ticks and ticks and I wait. And this is seconds, but in reality, it's days upon days. And the customer still has not received their package. That is the house on fire issue that Bezos talked about. So he realized that this was an issue that had to be resolved and that the day-to-day one-off discounts in shipping were not going to work. So he came up with this incredibly bold and unproven decision at the time: free shipping. 2-day, all-you-can-eat free shipping. Think about that for a moment. How can you ever model what the impact of a program like this would be to your bottom line, to your revenues? You cannot. No matter how many models and permutations the finance teams at Amazon would go through, the results were inconclusive. So Bezos made this incredibly bold decision to launch Amazon Prime for $79 per year at the time. That is write a lot. The Amazon leadership principle that is impossible to teach, and the topic for today's video. Write a lot means making a decision when the underlying data simply does not exist. You make that decision based on your gut, based on your instinct and intuition. Write a lot is very different from bias for action. Later in this video, I'll describe the difference between the two. But think of write a lot as you are literally blindfolded. Imagine I have this blindfold and I literally don't have access to my eyesight. I cannot see what's in front of me and I need to make a tough call with so much at stake, with the future of my company at stake. It doesn't get any bigger than this. And Bezos made that decision. And the rest is history. Amazon's revenue growth trajectory has gone through the roof. Other companies have copied their free shipping program, and online shopping is here to stay. All of that started and is today possible because of the write a lot Amazon leadership principle. My second story to illustrate write a lot is when Amazon revolutionized the book publishing industry. At the time, it was 2004 again. Amazon was making another major bet in addition to Prime. And that second major bet was on Amazon Kindle, on their ebook reader. The big difference between the launch of Prime shipping and the launch of Kindle was that Kindle at the time was an ancillary investment at Amazon. Bezos saw how significant Kindle could be for the business, but it was of secondary importance than Prime shipping. Those types of decisions are the best types of decisions to exercise write a lot. And Bezos is famous for saying how your margin is my opportunity, how I'm going to go into an industry and erode its margins and disrupt it with my innovation. And the three Amazon forces behind their flywheel, again, were the disruptors here. Those three forces were low prices, high selection, and convenience. Amazon had to make countless write a lot decisions along these three parameters to make Kindle a success. On the large selection side, they digitized tens of thousands of books, including all the bestsellers. On the convenience side, they worked on having long battery life, having inobtrusive backlighting, and giving customers the ability to seamlessly download their book over the air for free. And on the low pricing side, Amazon announced that all the bestsellers on their store would launch at $9.99. Compare that to a hardcover book, which frequently launches in the $20s or $30, and you cannot buy it anywhere else. And then later on, the book churns to a paperback and the price goes down. So effectively, Amazon was losing money at $9.99 for each of their best-selling books. But they did not care. That was the write a lot unproven decision to make. If you can find a story in your interview answers that illustrates Write a Lot in this capacity, where it was somebody else's margin and an unproven thing that you went after, and then you turned it into an outside success, your Amazon interviewers would love hearing that response from you. And by the way, this book that I've used as a prop, called Working Backwards, is an outstanding book about Amazon's culture, and I cannot recommend it enough. I'm not getting any affiliate payments for it. Just go look it up, buy it. If you're interviewing with Amazon or a bunch of other companies as well, it's going to help you immensely in your interview. All right, time to move to Write a Lot story number 3, which is how to hire without proof. Amazon, over the years, has developed a vaunted hiring and interviewing process. I used to be a part of that process. I used to be a bar raiser and bar raiser mentor at Amazon. And with that process, you evaluate each candidate along the 16 leadership principles at Amazon and determine if the candidate raises the bar across these 16 leadership principles or not. And it's a very elaborate process, which is a part of the reasons why you're watching this video. And Amazon has developed a lot of great mental structures and mental mechanisms to determine which candidates raise the bar versus which ones don't. However, infrequently, you just cannot tell. And you have to use your gut. You have to use your Write a Lot instinct to make a hire versus no hire decision. I'll give you a somewhat strange analogy. Imagine that on the one hand, you had a piece of delicious chocolate cake, and on the other hand, you had a pumpkin, a little baby pumpkin in this case. And I need to find out if the candidate would be a great fit with Amazon and raise the bar, therefore a chocolate cake in this case, or they would be a dud and they would be a pumpkin. Now, where this analogy is hopefully going to start making sense is when I bring up this very fun show on Netflix called Is It Cake? Is It Cake is a fun show where incredibly talented bakers make cakes that are super delicious and look like everyday objects. And then contestants have to guess which ones are real objects and which ones are made of cake. Which pumpkin is a pumpkin and which pumpkin is a cake pumpkin. So as a bar raiser, you have to make the same decision. You have a few hours with the candidate and you have to decide whether they are a delicious cake or whether they're a dud, whether they're pumpkin. Even in these cases when you encounter candidates who are on the bubble and it's tough to objectively predict if they're going to raise the bar or not, Amazon has developed mental mechanisms to help you with that as an interviewer. For example, they much prefer making false negative hiring mistake instead of a false positive one. And therefore, if there's any doubt in the loop that the candidate might not raise the bar, you as a team are on the side of not hiring the person. Also, as a bar raiser, I would train hiring managers and other interviewers who deliver incorrect hiring decisions in time, and I would help them improve. But having said all this, even though there are mechanisms that are there to help you, at the end of the day, there is a subset of these hiring decisions which rely on your Write a Lot. That is why Amazon develops bar raisers and bar raiser mentors to train those bar raisers and everyone else at the company, because you cannot completely make a hiring decision be 100% objective. All right, and the fourth and final Write a Lot story for today is what's the difference between Write a Lot and bias for action? The bias for action leadership principle is in play when you have to move quickly, when you collect about 60% of the data you need to make a decision, and then you move. Not because you cannot collect the remaining 40% and have 100% perfect data to make a decision. You can, but it's going to take you too long, and time is of the essence. Being fast and exercising decision velocity is of the essence. I've described this in more detail in a different video. You can watch it here. But going back to topic here, you make the decision quickly. And even if you make a few wrong decisions, that's totally fine. They're two-way door decisions anyway. You can undo them. And in the interim, you've also made a ton of correct decisions, and that gives you speed and velocity and moves your business forward. That's bias for action. Now, let's talk about Write a Lot. The biggest difference in the case of Write a Lot is what I've described so far over and over again. The data just does not exist. You're blindfolded. The data does not exist. It doesn't matter how long I would evaluate the Rubicon in front of me. There's not data to tell me if this would be a good decision or a poor decision. Therefore, you have to go with your gut. You have to go with your instinct. One final analogy for you. Let's say I have this deck of cards and I have to choose a card blindly from the deck, and I would go with, I don't know, King of Spades. And no, it's not King of Spades. And then I'd say, okay, Jack of Hearts. And, oh, kind of close, but no. So you can see how it doesn't really matter how long I study each of these cards. Just by looking on the other side of it, I don't have sufficient data to make the right decision of what the card would be. So that's what Write a Lot is after. You have a blindfold over you and you have to make a decision because it's crucial for your business, whether because A, it's Amazon Prime shipping, and without making this decision, your business is going to go into obscurity, or B, you're going after somebody else's territory and after somebody else's margin, as in the launch of Kindle. Sometimes you're gonna be wrong, but the best you can do is be right 50% of the time plus one time. In this video, I'll unpack the Amazon leadership principle, have backbone, disagree, and commit. And I'll show you in 6 steps how to argue the Amazon way. Step 1 is to focus on fixing what's wrong, not on proving that you're right. Your first move when disagreeing in the workplace would be to propose a different approach that better aligns with the needs of your customers or stakeholders. I'll give you an example. Imagine there's an orange and there's 2 people who are arguing over this orange. Both of them want the full orange and there's only one orange and there's 2 of them. And they're fighting and they're unwilling to compromise and they've reached the point of trading blows and they've dug in. What do? You could negotiate from the point of view of interests, not positions. This means that if you ask the 2 people what they need the orange for, one of them would tell you that they need the peels of the orange, right here, for their garden, to fertilize their garden. And the other person would tell you that they need the actual fruit of the orange to eat or prepare a pie with or whatever. So you see how by looking at this argument, at this disagreement from a different point of view would yield a beneficial outcome. You negotiate from the point of view of interests. Why do you need the orange? Not from the point of view of positions. I need an orange. That is step 1 in have backbone, disagree, and commit. And really, if you analyze that leadership principle, it's a principle that disagrees with itself. The first part of the leadership principle states disagree, and the second part states commit. So we will go through both parts in our 6 steps. And in this first step of arguing to solve, not to win, we're still firmly rooted in the disagree part of the leadership principle. Step 2 is let the data do the work. You've gone through step 1, and for whatever reason, your counterparty continues to disagree with you. And therefore, you go to step 2, which is use data. Use facts to show to the other party that your solution is better than theirs. Amazon calls this truth seeking versus social cohesion. Social cohesion means that if 2 people look at the ceiling in this office and one of them says the ceiling is 8 feet high, the other one says no, the ceiling is 10 feet high, and they start arguing and they argue about the height of the ceiling. And finally, they say, you know what, let's just split the difference. You say 8, I say 10. Let's just call it even and say that the ceiling is 9 feet high. That is social cohesion. Amazon hates that method of resolving conflict. Instead, you should go for truth seeking. You should seek the truth. Seeking truth, in my example, means to grab a measuring tape and to measure the actual height of the ceiling. Jump on this table in front of me and measure the ceiling and figure out that it's 8.37 feet high, whatever the number is. That is truth seeking. You use your data and your indisputable facts to convince the other person that your solution is superior. And as you can imagine, we're still very much in the disagree part of the leadership principle. Step 3 is to build a prototype as a proof point. Imagine you've gone through both steps 1 and 2 and your counterparty continues to disagree with you. Maybe in step 2, your data was inconclusive or your data did not exist and they continue to maintain their position. Step 3 comes to your rescue. Build a prototype as proof. Jeff Bezos calls this gamble with me. Instead of us wasting cycles on trying to convince each other of our viewpoints, especially in the lack of data, let's just do something small. Let's build a small MVP or a small prototype to give us data about which solution is superior. So to continue with my analogies, imagine this is a gambling saloon and you have 2 dice and you have to roll a 7. So if I roll the dice and this is 5, not very good, this is 8. You get my point. Instead of arguing about what the number would be if we roll the 2 dice, we just roll the dice and see what happens. So even if I disagree with you, I would gamble with you to build a small prototype and eliminate our confusion and give us some common data to keep building on. This 3rd step is the last part of the disagree section of the disagree and commit leadership principle. This takes us to step 4, commit and don't fight gravity. If for some reason your counterparty continues to disagree with you, you've gone through steps 1, 2, and 3, they maintain their position. What do you do next? You flip to the commit stage of the disagree and commit leadership principle. Why would your party still disagree with you? It does happen. Your party could be your leadership and they might disagree with your way of looking at things. Your party could be a customer who wants to pay you for a service that they want done in a specific way. Whatever the reason, you've gone through the 3 steps of the disagree part of the LP, of the leadership principle, and they have refused to move. This is the first step now, step 4, where you flip from disagree to commit and you stop fighting gravity. I mentioned gravity to quote Jeff Bezos, who says, disagree and commit doesn't mean you have not been heard. It means that once we have all committed, once a decision is made, you stop fighting gravity. Much like in Newton's law of gravity, the apple falls and gravity is something you cannot outlaw. You need to embrace it, whether you like it or not. The same is true for this stage of the disagree and commit leadership principle. You have gone through 3 steps. You've not been able to convince your counterparty of something that you want to get done. And then at this point, you flip. You go to commit. You fully embrace the solution that they've outlined, even if it contradicts your initial position, and you go with them. You are a team. A decision has been made, gravity has been established, and you march forward together. Step 5 is to evaluate the outcome of the decision. There's 2 outcomes. The decision either worked or it didn't. If the decision worked and it was the decision that you had disagreed with and then you committed to, fantastic. You update your database of learning and knowledge, and now you know that this is the best decision going forward. Option 2, however, is what if the decision did not work? What if, God forbid, your original decision was the correct one and following down this path revealed that the decision that you argued against in the first place was the wrong decision indeed? What do? You do not say, I told you so. You do not point fingers. To use a different analogy, if I had a whiteboard and if I drew on it plan A and plan A didn't work out, you don't shame the person who came up with the plan. You simply erase the old plan, you learn from your failings, and you come up with plan B or C or D or however long it takes to fix the issue. You do not shame the failure and the person who came up with it and the learnings from it. You embrace those learnings and you move forward as a team. That's what evaluate the outcome means as step 5. And again, this is firmly in the commit territory of the disagree and commit leadership principle. And the 6th step is the most important one. It's the so what step. What skills is Amazon testing you for in the interview? That's the most important thing. And you don't really know what part of the disagree and commit continuum your interviewer is going to focus on. They might be looking for someone with a backbone who's going to excel in the first 3 steps of the leadership principle, in the disagree set of steps. Or they could be looking for somebody who is open to collaborating and not casting blame. And they're looking for steps 4 and 5. Or most likely, they're looking for somebody who excels at both. The analogy I have prepared for you is you just don't know. If I say, hey, bring me a rock, you don't know what kind of rock I'm looking for. These are 2 different rocks that completely meet the definition of rock. This is a circular rock with a little bit of a dent, and this one is long and brown, and this one's kind of yellowish. Therefore, you need a disagree and commit answer that covers the continuum of the different steps of the disagree and commit cycle. In this video, I'll show you these 3 questions and how to answer them the right way. Question number 1 is, who is your best hire? When you hear this question, it's a guaranteed sign that Amazon is testing you for their leadership principle called hire and develop the best. This is a skill that Amazon expects all its leaders and people managers to be proficient in. So when they ask you who's your best hire, they're not asking you to praise one of the people on your team. They're testing how secure and how confident you are to hire someone who outperforms you. And not just outperform you, but who can even replace you in the future. If you have hired this exceptional employee, where are they now? Are they still below you? Why have you not moved them? When I was a manager at Amazon, I judged myself by one thing. If other managers and other teams weren't trying to poach people from my team, I was doing something wrong. Because exceptional talent, strong people, they attract attention. They need to move. As the saying goes, if you love someone, set them free. Give this person opportunities, including the opportunity to replace you one day, including the opportunity to go join a different team where they're going to give them even more visibility, because when you find someone who's better than you, you're supposed to make them your boss. That is why the hire and develop the best leadership principle is one of the non-teachable leadership principles at Amazon, because this kind of stuff is inherent to managers and to people leaders. It's tough to teach it to someone. In my Amazon career, I've had 2 cases where I've hired people and I've had to wait for them to start for months on end. The first time I had to wait for more than 3 months because of a visa issue, and the second time I had to wait for more than 6 months because of maternity leave. In both cases, I preferred to wait for months upon end because these were the people who raised the bar. I did not want yes people. I wanted people who would be better than me. And to use a silly analogy with this prop, if there's a crown, I want to take that crown as the team leader, as the team manager, and hand it over to that next hire who's better than me, who raises the bar, and who makes all of us better as a result. Okay, the second question is, who is your worst hire? If you thought who's your best hire question was hard, wait until this one. Who is your worst hire applies in situations where you either made a bad hire or when you inherited somebody who's underperforming on your team. In Amazon's eyes, an effective leader, an effective manager would spot the inefficiencies. They would spot the underperforming employee, and they would give them a very tight plan of no longer than maybe 3 or 4 months in which that employee needs to turn things around. And if they don't turn things around within that time frame, the manager's supposed to let them go. They're supposed to riff them and let them leave the company. I know this is going to be controversial. I know there may be comments in this video that disagree with my statement, but my job is not to be nice. My job is to help you get hired by Amazon, where poor performers are just managed out. When you inherit a bad performer or when you hire one, you're not supposed to wait for them for months on end to turn things around. You're not supposed also to push them to another team and have that employee become a problem of this other team. You're supposed to take the issue head on. Time is ticking and you have to do something about it. You can give the employee the opportunity to turn things around. Absolutely. You obviously cannot fire them at will. But that opportunity to turn things around needs to be very clear. If you're waiting for 6 months or 12 months, hoping blindly in the better angels of that person, that is a red flag at Amazon. When you get the question of who's your worst hire, it's not about making a bad hire. We make a ton of mistakes as employees ourselves. That's not the problem. The problem is what you do after you've made the bad hire. There's a saying that comes from Netflix, but it applies perfectly to Amazon. And the saying goes that we're not a family. We are a sports team. If you have a family member, you have unconditional love and loyalty to them. You give them the benefit of the doubt over and over and over again. That's not the workplace. We are a sports team. And if a team member does not perform, they will be let go. For example, it's much like a dead plant. It's a plant that has gone sick or has withered and died. And you could let this plant, you could allow this plant to spread the disease to other healthy plants. So for example, this plant here, it could catch that disease that the sick plant has and then carry it over to the next plant and so on and so forth. So underperformance, just like overperformance and excellence, spreads across teams. So your job as a leader is to catch that, to see it, to actively manage to remove the underperforming issue. And if the person continues to underperform, you've got to let them go. Another example of this thinking comes from Zappos, the online shoes retailer, which Amazon acquired back in the day. Now that's a part of Amazon. At Zappos, in the Zappos culture, they have this program called Pay to Quit. What this means is that once you join the company and you go through orientation as a new employee, that usually takes several weeks, call it 3 or 4 weeks. The Zappos teams then offer you a payment, a flat amount of $1,000 to $2,000 for you to quit, because now you understand how the company works, you know what's in front of you, and if you're not all in, they're actually going to pay you to leave the team because you're going to be a bad employee, you're going to be an underperforming employee, and you better leave. That's what Amazon is looking for, because when you are allowing someone who underperforms to continue to underperform, that is not kindness. That hurts everyone else around you. And your job as an Amazonian is not to lower the bar, it's to raise it. Your job is to protect the culture and to raise the bar. All right, question number 3 is, how do you develop your people? And this question 3 is for the middle 70%. That's the majority of your team. So for this question, Amazon wants to hear, how do you push people and how do you get them out of their comfort zone? When they make a mistake, how do you shield them and maybe even deflect and absorb some of the blame on you? We've talked about this in previous leadership principle videos, such as earn trust or backbone. Amazon wants to know, how do you develop these people to go from L5 to L6, from L6 to L7? What's the ramp plan in front of them? You as the manager are not the ceiling, you're the launch pad. One more analogy, if this is a stick of matches, you are supposed to be the spark. You're supposed to be the kindle that starts the fire and turns those people from the middle 70% to the top 20% while keeping everyone else from that 70% out of the bottom 10% if possible. And in this video, I'll unpack this secret Amazon leadership principle in 4 steps. Step 1 is why the Amazon interviewers always run out of time to measure this skill directly. This secret leadership principle is frugality. It's one of Amazon's 16 leadership principles. And for some reason or another, Amazon always runs out of time to ask direct frugality questions in their interview loop. Why is that? Is this skill not as important as the other 15 leadership principles at Amazon? No, it is very important, but here is the twist. The Amazon interview loop practices what's called fractal interviewing. This means that each of the 5, 4, or 3 people who are interviewing you on the loop is going to look at only 2 or 3 areas leadership principles or functional competencies at the most. They're going to spend their 45 to 60 minutes on just these 2 or 3 things. And when you line up all the racing horses, all these 16 Amazon leadership principles, plus the 3, 4, or 5 functional areas that Amazon's going to test you for, you can see how frugality is always the one that gets away. But here is what most candidates miss. The interviewers will still evaluate you for frugality. Especially in ops and fulfillment center roles, frugality is a must. Efficiency is a must. To give you an analogy, if this is a dollar bill, it goes far in the fulfillment centers and in the ops teams. You got to stretch that dollar bill. You got to really stretch it. Hopefully it doesn't tear here. So in ops, frugality is not optional. It's like oxygen. And the interviewers are trained to look for it. They're trained to evaluate it. This is not just the case for ops teams. It's the case for all of Amazon because the culture of Amazon is incredibly frugal. It starts from the very beginnings of the company, where unlike a lot of other high-tech companies that we know today that give you kombucha taps and free avocado lunches and all kinds of other perks for free, Amazon doesn't have any of that. Amazon would give you tea and coffee and chairs to sit on, and that's it. That is because frugality is incredibly central for the culture of the company. As a matter of fact, one of the most beloved parts of Amazon's culture, bring your dog to work, started and still exists today because that is very cheap to do. It is very cheap to bring your puppy to work, and it's much cheaper than, let's say, build a wellness center for your employees. So that part of the Amazon culture has flourished to the current day, and it started because of how frugal the company is. Another famous part of Amazon's frugal culture are the door desks. This is a famous story that when Amazon was founded and they were packing the very first books in Bezos' garage, everybody was kneeling on the floor of the garage and they were getting tired, and Bezos said, well, let's just get some knee pads so that we don't get exhausted and injured. And somebody else said, well, why don't we just make tables instead of having knee pads? Bezos thought that was a brilliant idea. They brought up a table, but then they quickly found out that it's expensive to buy tables, so they actually built the tables themselves. They took 4 wooden legs, and a door, and that's how they started creating the famous Amazon door tables. So the next time you interview at Amazon, imagine somebody whispering in your ear as you answer the question, yeah, but could you have done this with a door desk? So I'll share with you that when I started at Amazon, I was disappointed to find out that their conference room tables were actually regularly manufactured tables. I was curious to find out if they're going to have barn doors or something similar to that for their conference room tables, and I was a little disappointed that it was a violation of their culture code. Step 2 in explaining frugality is telling you how frugality contradicts a lot of the other Amazon leadership principles. Amazon has 16 leadership principles, and some of the more sexy ones include things like hire and develop the best, think big, high standards. Every single one of these leadership principles disagrees with frugality. Frugality flies in the face of all those high veneer leadership principles, high aspirational leadership principles. It's much like if you have a balloon for a lot of the Amazon leadership principles. Imagine that a lot of these leadership principles are like a balloon that aspires to soar high into the heavens, and then you have frugality, which is like a thumbtack, and pops a lot of these leadership principles and aspirations out of the water. So the key here is, can you still aspire for excellence and for thinking out of the box and for hiring the best people, so on and so forth, but can you do it within reason? Step 3 is how frugality gets evaluated indirectly through a lot of the other leadership principles. As we said, people run out of time to ask you frugality questions. 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, they're not going to have the time to ask you a dedicated frugality question, but they're going to evaluate frugality throughout your answers to the other leadership principles. As I mentioned, frugality disagrees with a lot of the leadership principles, but in a lot of others, it's inherently present. So for example, when you describe bias for action, or dive deep, or customer obsession, or ownership, so on and so forth, Amazon will evaluate what you've done and how you've achieved that final outcome. Amazon does not like splurging. Amazon does not like hedonistic expressions of wealth and consulting spend and going to experts to find out what your opinion should be. So in other words, frugality is like a secondary trait. Frugality is much like seasoning. It's much like salt and pepper here. And Amazon will test how well you prepare that whole meal with frugality as one of the key seasonings and ingredients in your final story. And this leads us to step 4. There are definitely times when frugality can quietly hurt you. It's very similar to golf. Nobody awards you points for being reasonable. But if you're not reasonable, you'll definitely get points deducted. And instead of golfing points, this time it would be with budgets. If you show bloat in your answers, if you show waste, that's definitely a red flag. But if you're reasonable, everything is fine. It's similarly to Amazon giving you a wallet and asking you to go as far as possible with what's inside this wallet without even opening your wallet. And then also for some roles, there's nothing in that wallet. It's an empty wallet for I'm joking, for fulfillment center roles and ops roles, there's nothing in the wallet. But the point is, you have to keep going as reasonably as you can. And if you do, you are considered to raise the bar on frugality. If you don't, that will backfire. And in this video, I'll explain to you why you should not waste your time getting ready for this interview skill and this leadership principle as you prepare for your Amazon interview loop. I'll do this in 4 short stories, starting with story 1, how Amazon's interviewers always run out of bandwidth to measure this leadership principle. This leadership principle is strive to be Earth's best employer, and Amazon simply cannot measure it in your interview loop. Why is that? Strive to be Earth's best employer is one of Amazon's 16 official leadership principles. They publish it on every job description. They are serious about practicing it, yet they never ask you questions for it in the interview loop when it matters, when the battle comes. Why is that? Because of a reason called fractal interview focus that Amazon practices in their interview loops. Fractal interviewing means that every one of your 3, 4, or 5 interviewers is going to focus on 2 or 3 areas at most during the 1 hour when they're going to interview you. And in that tiny container of time, the interviewer needs to fit enough behavioral data and illustrations and justification why or why not you raise the bar on the leadership principles that they have been assigned. I'll show you how this looks. If the interview is like this 2-cup measuring cup, and if as the interviewer I'm given 2 leadership principles, let's say this leadership principle is dive deep, and I pour this cup into my container. There you go, 1 cup gone. And then the second cup is ownership. I pour the second cup in the container, and you see how it is full. You're out. So I'll show you what happens when you pour a 3rd cup. I need this little tray here to not make a mess. But here's my 3rd cup. In this case, strive to be Earth's best employer. And as I start pouring it, obviously it overflows. I don't have the time to evaluate it in depth. That's what happens in every single interview during your loop. Interviewers do not have the physical capacity to evaluate strive to be Earth's best employer. So interviewers simply don't have the time. Deliver results is yelling at them in the background, focus on me, focus on me. Other leadership principles are doing the same. The most important ones, deliver results, ownership, bias fraction, they're all demanding the attention of the interviewer. And I want to be super clear here. In a different video, I described frugality. Frugality is similar to strive to be Earth's best employer in the fact that frugality does not get its dedicated set of questions. But frugality is vastly different because even without dedicated questions, the interviewers are evaluating you on your frugality chops. And they will reach a conclusion even if they don't ask a dedicated question. Here, strive to be Earth's best employer is a waste. Do not waste your time preparing for this leadership principle. Because for the most part, strive to be Earth's best employer is not an individual leadership principle. It's a corporate leadership principle and a corporate identity, much more so than an individual one. Which leads me to story 2. Why does this LP even exist? This LP, this leadership principle, is one of the newer 2 leadership principles that Amazon added somewhat recently. And much like others, this LP disagrees with other leadership principles as well. Strive to be Earth's best employer means that Amazon would be understanding and forgiving and accommodating of its employees. Other leadership principles are in direct conflict with this. I don't mean that Amazon is not understanding of you, but other leadership principles such as deliver results, ownership, high standards, dive deep, so on and so forth, they mandate performance. They mandate meritocracy and output. This leadership principle, best employer on earth, states the opposite, states, no, I need to be more forgiving and more accommodating of my people, be a good employer. So the conclusion here is that this leadership principle exists because Amazon is trying to grow up. Amazon is trying to go from its startup, chaotic, cutthroat days to a more well-rounded and established persona as a company, if you will. If I had a graduation cap here, I would have put it on and said, yes, Amazon is graduating and is ready for its adolescent life. And that's what this leadership principle is attempting to accomplish. This LP is sanding off Amazon's sharp edges, but it's focused on Amazon, not on you. Therefore, you should ignore it in your interview prep. My third story is how this leadership principle is the attempted antidote to culture cracks that have been showing at Amazon for a while. Everybody has read the horror stories about Amazon of people crying at their desks, of managers being incredibly ruthless, of people being hired to be let go in order to meet the quota of the bottom 5% performers being let go every year. The majority of these stories come from weak teams with weak managers who are cracking under the pressure. They are by no means representative of the broader Amazon culture at large, but whenever there's smoke, there's fire. So Amazon introduced this leadership principle as a buffer, as a correction mechanism. They're saying, we hear you that there's been some mutations in our culture and we're trying now to institutionalize these mutations away by legislating this new LP that's going to take care of it all. So in a way, Amazon is like a slinky with this leadership principle. It's trying to introduce flexibility into certain parts of its culture that have become too rigid over the years. But again, here's the kicker. Whether Amazon introduces this LP to grow up or whether it introduces this LP as an antidote to certain culture cracks, and both of these are true, again, none of this has to do with you. This is a corporate thing, not an individual performer thing. So essentially, studying for this LP is the equivalent of you reading the warranty manual of your Amazon interview preparation. So don't do that. Do not waste your time. This leads me to story number 4. What's the real reason Amazon added this LP? Amazon is one of the most powerful companies in the world, yet they have struggled retaining and attracting talent. I have been in meetings with Bezos personally, where we've gone through the math of how many math majors need to matriculate through the world's education systems and go all the way to from high school to college to university to being interviewed by Amazon and raising the bar, it becomes obvious, it's always been obvious, that the funnel isn't large enough to satiate Amazon's need for talent, let alone when you throw in all the other awesome companies out there in the world that are competing for this talent with Amazon. It becomes obvious that there are not enough candidates who can fulfill these Amazon requirements. And this is candidate scarcity that started in white-collar jobs, and now it's spread into flex jobs and fulfillment center jobs, into more blue-collar seasonal jobs. So Amazon is having this shortage of people power across the board. And they're saying now it's time for us to help our image and show these people that we are a kinder, gentler employer that cares for its employees. So essentially, this is a blank picture frame. And that's what Amazon attempts to achieve with this leadership principle. It attempts to wipe the slate clean and present itself to a lot of its candidates as a company that cares for them and appreciates them. And it certainly does. But that's been happening in between the lines. Now, Amazon puts this front and center in order to continue to grow and prosper as a company. So Amazon gives this message to the marketplace: we're supportive, we care, come join us, work with us, we have evolved. But here's where it gets messy. As I'm recording this video, Amazon has recently gone through a significant layoff of 14,000 employees. There's another layoff around the corner that's planned for about another 16,000 employees. And that really tells you everything you need to know. The other leadership principles are more important. Amazon is cutting that excess people capacity because it adheres more to its other leadership principles. The other leadership principles will always overpower this one. Deliver results, ownership, high standards, they will always matter more, no matter what. So do not waste your time getting ready for this leadership principle for your Amazon interviews. In this video, in 3 short stories, I'll describe what this Amazon leadership principle is, why it exists in the first place, and why you should ignore it every single time. Story 1 is how Amazon's interviewers always run out of time to ask you questions about this leadership principle. This leadership principle is success and scale bring broad responsibility. Amazon practices fractal interviews. This means that every interviewer is only going to look at 2 or 3 areas. And because of that fractal interview focus, Amazon can only cover in a 5% interviewer loop about 10 to 12 areas. And when you line up the racing horses in the Amazon interview, there are always 10 or 12 more important areas to look into than success and scale bring broad responsibility. That's why it's patently clear you should ignore this leadership principle every single time. The analogy I've prepared for you is this lighter. This leadership principle and the questions around it are like a lighter that never catches fire, that never catches on. So you should ignore it in your interview. End of story. Story 2 is why Amazon keeps this LP on their list. Even though Amazon will never measure this interview skill, they always have it in their leadership principles list. Why is that? The reason is because Amazon is maturing as a company. They're no longer a day one startup that started in Bezos's garage. They are a global incumbent. And with that power comes broad responsibility. With success comes responsibility. So Amazon wants to put on their countenance that they've grown, that they've matured. They have to worry about regulatory responsibility, community responsibility, environmental responsibility, safety responsibility. And this leadership principle is a result. So effectively, this leadership principle is entirely symbolic. It's like a crown. And this is a flimsy crown, but you get the point. It's like a crown that Amazon puts on, and it has absolutely no impact on your final hiring decision, but they have to put it on. now that they're a multi-trillion-dollar company in their valuation. Do me a favor, as you get ready for your Amazon interview, use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever other AI you're using and ask them to help you prepare for your Amazon interview. Even ChatGPT is not going to suggest success and scale bring broad responsibility questions for you to get ready for it. And if that's the case, you know this is a dead end that you should not follow. Think of this LP as elevator music. Everybody hears it, but nobody pays attention to it. Okay, story 3 is that there actually are a very, very limited number of edge cases when Amazon might ask you this question. Those edge cases are if your job at Amazon involves sustainability or community impact or safety impact. Amazon applies an immense amount of engineering focus and coding to every single part of their value chain. You would be surprised, as I was, how much rigor Amazon applies AI-wise, automation-wise, to every single part of their business. They have zero waste initiatives. They have efficient packaging initiatives. They have fulfillment center safety initiatives. And all of these initiatives, on and on, and all of these initiatives are grounded in engineering. That's Amazon's superpower. And if your role explicitly lists as this being one of your responsibilities, then you absolutely should study this leadership principle. But the chances of that happening are infinitesimally small. So Amazon uses this engineering rigor because even a 0.1% improvement in these countless processes, operations processes, means millions of dollars saved and tons of material saved for Amazon. So this is a big deal for Amazon. But again, in the context of things, the number of these roles that Amazon's hiring for is very, very tiny. My final analogy today is this deck of cards. So if I were to ask you to guess what card I'm going to draw, the likelihood of that happening is very low. It's similar with these roles. I'm saying I'm going to draw King of Spades. Let's see. No, it's 10 of Hearts. I'm going to say I'm going to draw 3 of Clubs. Nope. So the same is true for this leadership principle, for this set of questions. If Amazon wants to evaluate you on this leadership principle, they will let you know. They're going to warn you about this multiple times ahead of the interview. So unless your job description explicitly lists such sustainability and safety initiatives, you can ignore this leadership principle and focus on the other interview skills that Amazon will definitely test you for. Things like ownership, invent and simplify, customer obsession, deliver results, on and on and on. The other leadership principles, not this one. Now you know all 16 leadership principles and more importantly, how Amazon interprets them when they score your interview answers. If you want to take this one step further, I recommend you watch this video here next, where I break down the 7 steps to ace your Amazon interview from start to finish. Good luck, and I'll see you there soon.